Since I was a kid, I've always had a sense of general anxiety. It wasn't too bad when I was younger, but by middle school, I started having panic attacks whenever I'd need to give a presentation. And by high school, I started having panic attacks so debilitating I'd regularly need to leave class. The embarrassment of which would lead to, you guessed it, another panic attack. Over the past few years, I've been working to manage this anxiety, and I don't have the same problems that I had before, but I do get stressed out often. There's just so much to worry about. My crippling amounts of student debt, the fact that I'll likely never be able to afford really moving out, the fact that the field I want to go into is one with few open jobs and constant mass layoffs, global warming, just everything. I've gotten good at ignoring it and pushing it to the side, but often there's this sense that at any moment, my whole world could fully shatter. If I let my mind wander, think about everything I've been bottling up for even just a moment, I will break down completely. As such, I've tried to find more ways to calm my mind and just breathe. I play guitar, I drink tea, I read. But there's still this crushing feeling. Sometimes none of these things are enough to give me the peace I need. That feeling just sits, compounding more and more as the seconds go by. But recently, I found that thing, that moment that just makes all my worries wash away. It's, well, the first thing I discovered in the Outer Wilds was the other travelers' instruments. By equipping a signal scope, you can find different frequencies, each of which shows a traveler out there somewhere amongst the stars, playing a song for all to hear in perfect sync. When I first found this, silhouetted by the rising sun, I knew instantly which one I wanted to find. Each of these instrumentals is beautiful in their own way, but there's something different about Rybek's banjo, something extra comforting. Maybe it's the simple chords or the nostalgic folkiness of the instrument, but I couldn't tell you. I can only tell you how it makes me feel. Throughout the game, at any point you can whip out that signal scope again and find those familiar melodies, a brief moment of comfort in an otherwise vast space. At one point, in an attempt to clip through one of the harder to access planets, I found myself flying completely out of the solar system, and at the prompting of my friend, pulled out my signal scope. All of those separate melodies, previously kept apart by planets and distance and the void, joined together. And it was beautiful. As I got closer and closer, I listened as each of them faded away, and I was left with just Rybek's banjo. It was the first time the game made me cry. Here's the thing. In the Outer Wilds, the world is going to end. Maybe like me, you'll die 1 billion deaths before you actually get to see it for the first time, crash into the sun 1,000 times before it crashes into you. But the furthest you will ever get in this game is 22 minutes before the sun comes crashing down. Despite this limitation of 22 minutes, I never really felt stressed in the Outer Wilds. Yes, there's only 22 minutes before the world ends, but there's so much time. Take a break, breathe, explore. When it all ends, you'll still have more time. When I first found Rybek, it was completely accidental. I crash-landed onto Brittle Hollow and decided to explore, where I realized this giant rock pillar was following me. It was creepy, disturbing almost. Then I got a pop-up of an unknown signal, and I heard that familiar banjo, and I descended down into the crust of the planet. Brittle Hollow is almost terrifying. A planet built entirely over a black hole, the threat of the void ever present. Over the course of those 22 minutes, most of the planet's crust will fall into the black hole at its core. But it was there I found Rybek, a warm fire, and some marshmallows. I've spent multiple hours of in-game time just sitting there, hearing the crackle of the fire and listening to that beautiful banjo. That feeling of the end, that pressure of the outside world is still there, but for just a few moments, I have a place to rest. Even as Ryback plays the banjo, the planet's crust falls around them. It's not truly safe here, but there's still an unshakable peace. The void is still there, but it can wait. It almost feels like a safe room, the age-old horror game tradition. A room designed just for you to take a moment and breathe before going out to face the dangers that await you. But Outer Wilds isn't a horror game, and this isn't a safe room. You're never really safe. Everything you have to fear is still there, right next to you. But you still have time to rest. Throughout the game, Outer Wilds stresses this need to rest even more. Yes, you have a time limit, but when it's done, you'll be back here. So what's the rush? You can always try again. If you can't figure something out, try again next loop. You only have 22 minutes, but you have 22 minutes infinitely. A game I've weirdly spent a lot of time with is Mountain. It's just that, Mountain. The game's opening proclaims, "You are Mountain, you are God," and it really is that simple. Just a mountain floating in space. You can zoom in and out, click and move random space junk that crashes down, but there's not much else to do. There are keyboard buttons that make random music, there's a button that gives the mountain thoughts, there's even a button to cause an apocalypse, and a button to save the mountain from that apocalypse. But there's not much else here. As Cameron Kunzelman wrote for Paste Magazine, it becomes a game of endurance. How much mountain can you take before you close it in boredom? What I find so fascinating about Mountain is exactly the same thing that has led to years and years of debate and discussion about art. That act of doing nothing. Just sitting with the void, really feeling it. Few games these days allow a player to sit with their own thoughts and feelings. Mountain is essentially just the player's thoughts and feelings.
In part 3 of his seminal work, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, Robert M. Pirsig writes about what it's like to really climb a mountain. The mountain itself is important. Anyone climbing just for ego won't really be satisfied by the mountain. Instead, a mountain needs to be cherished. You have to slow down and take the time to appreciate what's beautiful about it. Mountains should be climbed with as little effort as possible and without desire. The reality of your own nature should determine the speed. If you become restless, speed up. If you become winded, slow down. You climb the mountain in an equilibrium between restlessness and exhaustion. Then, when you're no longer thinking ahead, each footstep isn't just a means to an end, but a unique event in itself. This leaf has jagged edges, this rock looks loose. From this place, the snow is less visible, even though closer. These are things you should notice anyway. To live only for some future goal is shallow. It's the sides of the mountain which sustain life, not the top. Here's where things grow.
In Super Mario Galaxy, there's a room on the Comet Observatory that's easy to miss. It's a library, and through several returns, you can catch Rosalina telling a story to the Lumas. The story of how she lost her mother and found her place in the stars. Aside from a bit of Rosalina backstory, this room doesn't serve any narrative purpose. There's nothing here that will help gameplay, and you don't get any sort of reward for catching the whole story. It's just a brief moment to take your time and rest, listen to a story, and then venture back out. All the battles you have yet to face are still out there, and you still have to face them. There's no avoiding it. But for just a moment, sit here with Rosalina and the Lumas and listen. It won't change anything, but maybe it'll help you feel better.
There's no real safety on Brittle Hollow. I mean, the floor is a literal black hole, and one misstep will send you shooting off into the void with no ship and minimal oxygen left. As Ryback plays their banjo, rubble falls in the background, and you can hear the sound of the planet shaking. In 22 minutes,
the sun will still devour you. In 22 minutes, this moment will have changed nothing. And that's okay.
Sometimes having peace just means finding a place to rest, even if you can still see the sky falling all around you. The world's ending, or maybe it already did, but we still have time.